Wrestling is gay, according to Effy here in Pride Month, being the month of June here in 2020. Effy was on the Busted Open podcast to promote his big gay brunch this year and just to talk about the gay community in professional wrestling, the trans community in professional wrestling, and how things have changed over the years and how Effy, just on the independent level, just being who he is, has been able to go out there and make some real change. Check out this clip.
The sort of battle that our transgender brothers, sisters, and non-binary family are going through right now, where I know a lot of professional wrestlers personally who are transgender, and some of them are non-binary, which means that they do not identify as any gender at all. And you don't want to have to be the sword all day. But when people constantly misgender you, when people segment you in a group because they go, well, you can't go over here with the guy, so we got to just say you're a women's wrestler, even though that's not how you identify. Seeing them continue to just kind of push forward and get to that next step, even though they've had everyone looking at them going, well, you need to fit into here, you need to fit into something, sorry you feel that way, but if you're not fitting in, it's not going to work for the programming. So as we move forward, I know that, the gays and girls have gotten a lot more opportunities, but I want to make sure that we're still uplifting in the same way in the real world as we are in the wrestling world, our transgenders, brothers and sisters and family members out there, because I think that's the next step of this fight. And if gay people or lesbians are paying any attention, a lot of this stuff mirrors perfectly. And like you said, Mark Henry, with the civil rights, it mirrors perfectly. And it's a tale as old as time. This different person than you, who you may not have the knowledge or education on, let's just hate it, or let's push it away, or let's not deal with it, versus what are we missing as a community because we're not involving these individuals.
Yeah, for sure. Effy's made a lot of progress in professional wrestling just single-handedly by himself. But wrestling has always been, even though culture in general hasn't been entirely friendly to the gay and trans community until just kind of recently, it started to move along to where you're seeing a lot of pride flags hung up in windows, and all these corporate logos are changing to the pride flag and that kind of thing for the month of June. So people are progressing slowly, but I feel like wrestling has kind of always been on this tip to a certain extent. Even all the way back to, what was it, the 50s with Gorgeous George, there were certainly some homosexual undertones to that character, other than he was just, acting all girly and stuff, but he pushed boundaries back in the day. He went out there and I don't know him personally as far as, I don't know, personally, I didn't hang out with the guy. I mean, I don't know if he was actually gay or not, or exactly to the extent of what he was as a real person, but as a character, as a showman, and he was one of the first real characters in professional wrestling. That's why he's so remembered. There's always the tough guys, the shooters, your Gotchas and your Hackenschmidts and your Thezes and that kind of stuff. But when you get to a Gorgeous George, you're like, okay, that guy's a character. He's a personality, and he's a little bit femmy too. You know what I'm saying? So in the 50s, that was so taboo and so outrageous, and he was such a heel for doing it. But even as far back as then, it's been in professional wrestling. Then you move forward to, during, I guess, the 60s and the 70s, everybody was kind of aware, at least, that Pat Patterson was. And there was that promoter that Jim Ross always imitates. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but my boy, that guy. So I mean, there's always been openly gay people. Maybe not openly. I don't know that Patterson ever. It was like a known thing. Like everybody knew it, but it just wasn't talked about. So. But nobody cared. Wrestling business, even back in the 70s and 80s and the 60s, whatever, it was always a bunch of tough guys, right? I'm a tough guy, manly men, big burly bar fucking fighting, cigar smoking, fucking bowler hat wearing, barrel chested, hairy beasts of men, right? That's what professional wrestlers were. Shooters, tough guys, badasses. But I think overall accepting, Patterson, to my knowledge, And I haven't read his book, so I don't know. Some of you may know more than I do, but for the most part, I don't think there was a lot, and maybe just because he wasn't open about it, but I don't think he got a lot of like hate or flack. He wasn't like he's always been a well-respected wrestler in the business, right? And then moving forward to Goldust in the 90s, when the Goldust character, that really pushed boundaries. That was like, I said Gorgeous George pushed boundaries back when he just kind of came out and did the feminine act. He was just feminine. That was the only thing that he really did differently than, the other people were doing at the time. He wasn't like trying to grope people and stuff. But Goldust took it to that level. There's a feeling everybody... Man, he made people uncomfortable, and there were complaints. Scott Hall at the time was uncomfortable with it. Didn't want to work with Goldust. He was creeped out by all the. Remember when Goldust came out? I don't know if you guys, because I'm not talking about. Some of you might just be familiar with like Attitude Era Goldust, right? Where he's just kind of like the weirdo guy, which is a fun character too. But when he debuted, if you remember, especially those early weeks. Well, maybe it wasn't right away. He was kind of just the Hollywood kind of weirdo, like the Hollywood statue come to life. But quickly he became very like homoerotic, and he was very touchy. And he painted the heart on his chest with razor, and it was all glittery. He had the match with Piper, and he was wearing lingerie under his gear. I think he had flowers given to Razor Ramon. So Razor was very uncomfortable. That's how he ended up with his match with Roddy Piper at WrestleMania. It was supposed to be him and Razor, but Razor wanted nothing to do with it. And he was on his way out the door anyway. But the definitely that angle made him super uncomfortable. So Goldust pushed a lot of boundaries back in he even went further with it over time, and then they kind of chilled out on the homoerotic. They got a lot of hate mail, they got a lot of calls, that was a very taboo character at the time, very ballsy to put out. So again, wrestling on the forefront of being progressive, which, bringing it back to Effy now, I think we have reached a place where professional wrestling, especially on the indie level, I don't know if you guys have ever been to indie shows, or some of you even been a part of an indie locker room. They're very eclectic, and I feel like that's just how wrestling is in general. Maybe not so much on WWE. You don't get the cast of characters on that level because they're all like ex-college football players that just get fucking trained up through the PC, and they're all just jocular, cookie cutter people for the most part. With the exception of a few. I'm not trying to generalize everybody, but for the most part, on the indie level, it's very eclectic. There's a lot of fucking weirdos that show up there. And I feel like the wrestling is a community where everybody's accepted. It's like the Island of the Misfit Toys, right? That whole thing where you don't belong in your normal life here, and you don't belong in your normal life there because of this, or this. But when we all come together and we do these shows on the weekends, we are a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a family. They really are. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, what your beliefs are, what your sexuality is, what you identify as. Do you love wrestling? Can you wrestle? Welcome. And I think that's just so fucking dope that we're there at this point. Because honestly, like, who cares? At the end of the day, like, why does it matter who the guy next to you likes to have sex with, right? Like, or what kind of sex they like to have, like, let people be freaks. Let your freak flag fly, let people do their thing. At the end of the day, if nobody's bothering you, then let people do them. You know what I mean? At the same time, I think we got to be a little bit careful about trying to over push it. Because there is a lot of sexualization to younger kids nowadays and that kind of thing as well. We do got to remember we're talking about sexuality here, these are grown up things to a certain extent. So you got to be careful on both sides, but at the end of the day, we have to be very accepting. We got to open up. We got to just put, if you're somebody, if you don't like, I'm a man's man, I don't like that gay shit. So if that's you, who cares? Put it aside. It doesn't affect you. You know what I mean? And I think Effy's doing a great job of continuing to push that, move that forward, his big gay brunch, and now wrestling is very much opened up to the trans community, not just with Nyla Rose being on national TV and being a champion, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, but also just I've seen it everywhere, all over the indies. There's lots of the trans community are getting into wrestling now. Wrestling is going to attract an eclectic bunch, and they're all welcome. And it's very open nowadays, and wrestling has always been at the forefront of being progressive, and I hope it continues to do so. And for anybody that's against it, just chill the fuck out, right? Oh yeah, thanks for checking out the video. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like it if you liked it. Yeah, and you can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on the channel. Oh yeah, dig it.